in hockey discussion. And I want to thank everyone for coming out today and welcoming everyone to our session for today. So I think we'll just get started with the formal programming. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for what is sure to be a remarkable month of celebration and learning. I am Marty Landrie, Executive Director for the Indigenous Wellness Core, and I'm located in Edmonton, and I do cheer for the Oilers, but I was going to cheer for Calgary too if they won. And it's my pleasure to be here with you to guide you through these opening ceremonies for National Indigenous Peoples Day. We have a variety of speakers joining us today to kick off the month of celebration. But first, let's start off in a good way with an opening prayer from Emil DeRocher from the Indigenous Wellness Core. Thank you, Emil. Welcome everyone who just joined us too for our National Indigenous Peoples Day kickoff celebration. This month we celebrate the theme healing through mind, body, and spirit. Part of this journey includes healing practices that include art and its many forms in Indigenous cultures. We are fortunate to have several unique and highly talented artists who have agreed to share some of their work with us today. Kurt Young is an international entertainer, singer, songwriter, grass dancer, artist and actor from Gordon's First Nation and Cowessess First Nations in Saskatchewan. Kurt's music embraces storytelling as a solo artist and high energy performances, using music as a teaching tool to unite people and captivate audiences. Kurt is an artist designing porcupine quill jewelry, keeping the old tradition alive with a contemporary feel. Kurt also facilitates workshops to children and youth, sharing teachings on cultural knowledge and wisdom, combined with traditional and modern styles of music. Kurt recently completed his first documentary on the land search that took place outside of the residential school on his reserve in Gordon's First Nation. Please join me in welcoming Kurt Young, who will be performing an honor song for us today.
Hanse, Visigasun, Sipawe Pakiwawi, Mustas, Anin Shikwagin. We are hell, hey, 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 get your money to Thank you.
Hi.
Just trying to find my mute button. Thank you very much, Kurt. Can you imagine if every hospital had an opening honor song like that every morning? That would really be something. I'm just thinking out loud. But thank you very much, Kurt. That was very beautiful, and I appreciate you being able to come and start us off with that honor song. Next, we would like to welcome our zone leadership to offer a few words this morning. We'll start with Stacy Greening, the Chief Zone Officer from the North Zone. Welcome, Stacy, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Marty, and I want to thank those who have started us off in a good way this morning. AHS North Zone resides and operates on the ancestral and traditional home of the people of the Treaty 6 and 8 regions in Northern Alberta. The Métis Nation of Alberta regions 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, and the 8 Métis settlements. Our geographic boundaries include 32 First Nations, and Alberta is also the only province that has land set aside for Métis settlements. I honor all of our Indigenous communities today. For me, it is important that we acknowledge the land we live, play, work, and thrive on, as it reminds us of the past and the harms that happened and commits us to do better going forward. These acknowledgements center us on something larger than ourselves and remind us that we are sustained by the land and connected through this land to each other. Acknowledging the land is the first step in joining with our Indigenous communities in not only reconciliation, but also reconciliation. The most important part of this work for me is the human in me connecting with the human in you. It has been my honor to work alongside our Indigenous communities to learn and explore the importance of land, Mother Earth, and Turtle Island. I am grateful for the friendships I've cultivated, and I fully acknowledge the harms of the past and want to move forward in friendship as we strive to honor the peoples that have walked this land since time immemorial. I want to thank the North Zone communities that are working with us to identify how we can demonstrate commitment to the treaties that were created on these lands. I also want to thank the Indigenous Wellness Core and our North Zone Indigenous Health Team, Shannon Dunfield, Donna Mateer, and Sandra Herrick, for the work they do in the North Zone to ensure the voices of our Indigenous communities are heard and responded to. Thank you for joining in today as we honor and celebrate our Indigenous communities and the Indigenous culture and rich heritage through this month and beyond. May we all learn this month, not only with our heads, but most importantly with our hearts. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy. We will now hear from Dr. Kirsty McClellan, Acting Zone Medical Director from the Edmonton Zone.
Oh, good morning, everybody. AHS Edmonton Zone resides and operates on the ancestral and traditional territories of the people of Treaty 6 and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 4. The city of Edmonton itself, of course, is home to one of the largest urban Indigenous populations in Canada and people who bring rich heritages and cultural traditions from across this land. Carol and I recently had the opportunity to participate in a meeting with the Indigenous elders where we were able to sit with them all day actually and hear perspectives around healthcare for Indigenous people in the Edmonton Zone. And very importantly, we got to hear their stories of growing up, their stories of themselves and their friends and their families and what life has been like. Their insight will help us develop a healthcare plan for the next 15 years. I think for me, though, the thing that the session highlighted was how much we really need to listen and learn to begin to close the gap in terms of health outcomes and experiences in care between Indigenous and non-Indigenous populations. We clearly must address racism in the healthcare system, and we cannot do it alone. So we need to act on the stories that we have heard and we are hearing and the recommendations that were given. We want to continue these important conversations with leadership, both formal and spiritual, as well as support the Indigenous Wellness Core so that we can learn and better understand the needs of Indigenous peoples. So I would also like to acknowledge the great work that has started in the Edmonton Zone, beginning with our long history of providing cultural and spiritual support to patients through the Cultural Helper Program, the Aboriginal Diabetes Wellness Program, and the new primary care center located at the Indigenous Wellness Clinic at Anderson Hall near the Royal Alexandra Hospital, as well as the Stollery Iwasasuk Program and the Indigenous Engagement Strategy, the blessing of the new Edmonton Hospital grounds, and the establishment of the only permanent sweat lodge on AHS grounds at Alberta Hospital Edmonton. So as we celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Month and recognize the traditional lands, I'm reminded of the work that we need to do in order to build those healthy relationships and our need to build a sense of belonging for Indigenous peoples in AHS buildings. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. McClellan. And I was lucky to be part of the elders sharing last week as well. And just wanted to let everyone know that that was organized by our cultural upper lead, Elder and Emil Durosher. And if anyone has an opportunity to go visit the cultural grounds there in the teepee and the sweat lodge and the new cultural center, I encourage everyone to spend some time out there. It's very beautiful. So thank you. We'll continue our journey south by welcoming Andrea Thane-Liptak, Senior Operating Officer from the Central Zone.
Thanks, Marty, and good morning. Today, on this opening of National Indigenous Peoples Month, I am honored in the spirit of reconciliation to acknowledge that across the Central Zone, we live and work on the traditional Treaty 6 lands of the Plains Cree, as well as the traditional Treaty 7 lands of the Blackfoot, Blood, Piegan, Stoney, and Sarcee First Nations, and Métis Nations 3 and 4. I am blessed this morning to be sitting near the banks of the Waskesiu-Cece, where the Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 lands meet at the water. I respect the treaties that were made on these territories, and I acknowledge the impact of residential schools and the resulting intergenerational trauma on our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And I am dedicated to moving forward in partnership with our Indigenous communities in a spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Specifically in Central Zone, we share the land with the 4 Treaty 6 nations at Musqueam and Pigeon Lake, Ermineskin, Louisville, Montana, and Samson Cree First Nations, as well as the Treaty 6 nations of Sunchild and Ochese. We also share our land with Bighorn First Nation, which is a Treaty 7 community of the Stoney Nakoda First Nation. And we recognize and value the many urban Indigenous peoples who enhance the fabric of communities across the zone, including Red Deer, Rocky Mountain House, Ponoka, Wetaskiwin, and Two Hills. We are very excited in Central Zone to be reinitiating our Indigenous health planning in collaboration with the Indigenous Wellness Core and our Indigenous partners across the zone. A foundation of our work will be to hear from Indigenous patients and their families about their care and experience in our facilities. We need and want to do better, and understanding the lived experiences of our Indigenous populations will guide and enhance our efforts and outcomes. We look forward to connecting with our Indigenous communities after the summer powwow and ceremony season. We are thankful the Indigenous people of our land are able to celebrate life through ceremony this summer after 2 seasons of pause due to COVID. These ceremonies are so important to the well-being of our Indigenous people, families, communities, and nations. Thank you for the opportunity to offer this welcome today. I would like to close with gratitude for my Indigenous colleagues and friends and their patient and gracious support of my allyship and competency journey. I look forward to growing through participation in Indigenous Peoples Month activities throughout June, including the opening of our cultural room in Wetaskiwin on June 21st. Hi, Ishnish, Miigwech. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Next, we'll hear from Nick Thane, Senior Operating Officer from the Calgary Zone.
Thanks, Marty, and good morning. And thank you, Emil, for the opening prayer and starting us in a good way. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, the Calgary Zone teams acknowledge that we live, work, and play on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Kainai, Piikani, and Siksika, as well as the Tsuut'ina Nation and Stoney Nakoda First Nations. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We also recognize that many First Nations, Métis and Inuit, have lived in and created these lands for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are with us today that we continue to learn from, and those who have gone before us. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude for those whose territory we reside on. For me, today is a privilege to be asked to provide this acknowledgement. We honor and celebrate the contributions of Indigenous peoples leading up to Indigenous Peoples Day and beyond. While the past 2 years have certainly presented challenges, it has also demonstrated opportunity. And I need to recognize the significant commitments and dedicated work done by all First Nations, Métis, and urban Indigenous leaders and their communities towards our collective COVID-19 response. The relationship and system-based actions taken were built on trust, respect, and collaboration. We are committed to walking this journey together with the belief that all of us can make a difference by acknowledging the resilience and healing that comes with the land. Through our Indigenous Health Action Plan, we promise to speak our truths, listen to one another, create strong, respectful relationships, and work together on common goals and actions. I want to close with acknowledging my Indigenous health colleagues across the zone for the learnings, teaching, and knowledge that they share with me, along with my personal journey of learning. So with that, thank you, Marty, and thank you all for the opportunity today.
Thanks, Nick. And finally, let's hear from Colin Zieber, Senior Operating Officer from the South Zone.
Okay, Sunny Tapi, good to see everyone. Thank you for the honor and the privilege of bringing greetings this morning. Thank you, Emil, for the prayer and really starting us off well this morning. I appreciate really the opportunity. Our hospitals, our health centers, and the wide span of territory where our community teams work is all situated on traditional Blackfoot territory. For the South Zone, we acknowledge working on the territory of the Piikani and the Kainai Nations, and also part of the Blackfoot Confederacy and Treaty 7 lands and the Métis Territory 3. We are willing to learn, work with Indigenous people and their health teams as we work hard to reconcile. If technology would have worked out better for us this morning, I would have been speaking from our traditional healing gardens, which is at the Chinook Regional Hospital, where we have some mint and sage and other traditional plants growing, and we look forward to intertwining our traditional Indigenous medicine and our Western medicine together. And again, we look forward to reconciling and working together with their Indigenous teams. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. And thank you all to the zone leadership. We don't often get a chance to share widely what is happening in the zone. So thank you all for being here with us today and sharing your updates. Now, I would like to acknowledge where we were this time last year, if you all remember, as we prepared to celebrate the National Indigenous Peoples Month in June 2021. We were all shaken by the news of the discovery of the 215 unmarked graves of children at the site of Canada's largest residential school near Kamloops, BC. We soon learned over the past year that this was only the beginning, and the discoveries of unmarked graves and other residential school sites across Canada are now in the thousands nationwide. So we want to take a moment to honor those who were lost and now return to their families and communities so that they may now find peace. So I'd like you to join me in a moment of silence for these children. Thank you. Our communities continue to collectively grieve with great sadness and heartache. I think the whole nation is actually grieving. For many individuals and families, this continues to trigger traumatic memories of their experiences caused by residential schools and its intergenerational effects. And we must work together to help them deal with these emotions. We know that these discoveries will continue to be made in the future. We as AHS and the broader Canadian society must stand together in our resilience and continue down a path of reconciliation by acknowledging the past and educating future generations, which is why we gather together every June. In the past, it felt like Indigenous people were the only people raising the issues, and we soon learned that, right? To educate, to identify why Indigenous health is the way it is, and the solutions to those issues. But we are seeing more action from our allies and our non-Indigenous leaders, sharing and educating and acknowledging and showing and understanding that we haven't seen before. We still have a lot of work to do, but we are making progress through collaboration and understanding. I am excited for what the future holds and the progress we can make if we continue to work together. Part of our collaboration involves engagement with Indigenous elders, communities, and stakeholders. Today, we are fortunate to have with us Casey Eaglespeaker, Vice Chair of the Indigenous Wisdom Council. Casey is a Blackfoot elder and a Blood Tribe member who for the last 20 years has acted as a cultural advisor to many Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations, facilitating hundreds of presentations on pathways to wellness, identity, and belonging. He is the Indigenous Resource Coordinator at Health Services in Calgary, where he provides cultural and spiritual education supports to high-risk youth and their families. In 2000, Casey received 2 awards, the Chief David Crowchild Award from the City of Calgary for his hard work in cross-cultural awareness, and the Dr. Joseph Crowshoe Award from the University of Calgary for his tireless work in Indigenous education. Welcome, Casey.
I was going to do sign language if I couldn't unmute, but okay. Nisoniko Kochimiotats. It's a Kanakon at Sixkakon. I am Sawhorse, member of the Kainai Nation, part of Black Confederation, and welcome you all this morning. I think when we look at our wellness, our healing journey, and that's what it is, because healing is never 100%. That's only when we enter the spirit world. But it is the name of a journey to get to a place of well-being in our mind, body, and spirit, and our emotions. But it's how we venture into that realm and understanding that, our spirit has a body. Contrary to what people say, the body has a spirit. It's actually the spirit that has a body, and it's that body that's gifted to us by our Mother the Earth. And it's our Mother the Earth who owns our body. It's a vehicle for us. But in understanding that we need to go into a journey that we address those physical needs, our mental needs, our spiritual needs, as well as our emotional needs, to get to this centered place of wellness, where there's this constant movement, a constant flux. And that's something that's real for us. And understanding that if we can identify that our spirits come from the same source, because that's a true image of the Creator, then we should not be looking at differences, but what do we have in common and what do we have as parallels? And then also being able to make those relationships. But to remember, making relations is at the speed of trust. And we need to understand that on this journey together. Indigenous people have always been open and accepting, but have always been marginalized. The damages of residential schools still resonate. I spent 9.5 years in there. I know what I went through. But I also understand that it's the culture of our people, my culture of the Black Confederation, that actually put me back in place to realize that that life was worth living for, that I was worthy of it. Then I had to go on a journey to get to a mental place, a well place in my mentality, to reconnect to my spiritual beliefs, my spirituality, my people, and to my own spirit, and then to cleanse the body. That journey is true for anybody, but you need to grasp onto that. You need to hold on to what we know is the truth, and Indigenous people are looking for that. Our truth in Blackwood, how we really identify as Chitapiks, real people, human beings. Every one of our cultures, Indigenous cultures, identify themselves as being connected to the land. Well, we are the land. We are part of the land. We are the weakest link in nature, of course. But everything out there is relative to us. The trees, the grass, the waters, the mountains, the rocks, those that crawl upon the earth, ones that live below the surface of the earth, the ones that live in the water, the ones that fly, the four-legged. These are our relatives. And we have to understand that journey of healing journey is the entitlement that every human being has to live in good health and to live in a realm of wellness within their own being. This is deserving of every human being in the world. And I think that's only true for all of us. I think we also felt the pain of the 19 children that were killed in Texas. Innocent children, children of color, unfortunately. But it's instances like that that should bring us back around and say, where do we create this equality and equity? And that's to hear the truth and walk with us and understand the physical needs, the mental needs, the spiritual needs, and emotional needs. It's all encompassing to be whole. So thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Now, everything we do wouldn't be possible without the support and encouragement of the AHS Executive Leadership Team. Therefore, we are joined by Dr. Mark Joffe, Vice President and Medical Director of Cancer Care Alberta, Clinical Support Services, and Provincial Clinical Excellence. Dr. Joffe provides operational and strategic leadership for the delivery of high quality, patient-focused, integrated, and sustainable healthcare. An experienced healthcare leader with a lifelong passion and interest in the prevention of infectious diseases, Mark has worked with the former Capital Health and now Alberta Health Services for more than 20 years. Mark's diverse clinical experience includes his specialty practice in infectious diseases based at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Edmonton, as well as staff physician at the Edmonton Sexually Transmitted Diseases Center in the Edmonton Institution for Women, a federal corrections facility. A Calgary native, Mark graduated with his Doctor of Medicine from the University of Calgary in 1982, twice nominated for an AHS Alberta Health Services President's Excellence Award in 2016, AHS Serious Communicable Disease Team, and 2015, AHS Ebola Response Team. Mark has also been recognized with a Certificate of Meritorious Service from the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta, and has garnered many honors over his extensive career. Welcome, Dr. Joffe.
Thank you, Marty, for that very kind introduction. That was more than necessary and more than expected. Thank you all for joining us here this morning for these opening ceremonies. Thank you, Amo, for the opening prayer that started us off in a good way today. Thank you, Casey, for those comments and your teachings. And thank you to Kurt as well for the honor song. I certainly agree with you, Marty. I wish we could start off every day with an honor song just like that. I feel very honored to be involved in this work, and I'm looking forward to all of the learning opportunities that the team has lined up for us this month. I look forward to National Indigenous Peoples Month and all of the ways that we can gather together to highlight everything that is taking place around this organization related to Indigenous wellness. We are celebrating Indigenous peoples' culture and wellness, and this year's theme, as you've heard, is healing through mind, body, and spirit. I look forward to attending as many sessions as I possibly can over the course of the month, and I encourage you all to do the same. Sessions will include a physician panel where you'll hear from physicians about how they are working with Indigenous clients and families in their zones. There's a session on the toll-free support line that's being piloted in the North Zone that will assist Indigenous clients with navigating the health system. You'll also hear from Seniors Health, who have developed a resource for caring for Indigenous clients within continuing care. There will also be opportunities to learn about Indigenous culture and history and how to be an ally in Indigenous wellness. It is important that this entire organization commit to learning ways that we can continue on our journey to providing culturally safe and accessible healthcare in our province. You will hear from Dr. Pamela Roach about racism in the healthcare system, and from the University of Calgary about strategies that we can implement to address Indigenous specific racism in the healthcare system. It is our job as providers and administrators to take action by learning, by listening, and by being allies. The Indigenous Wellness Core seeks to generate a healthcare system with an organizational culture that honors Indigenous self-determination, values Indigenous worldviews, and understands our system's role in supporting Indigenous people, communities, and nations. The Indigenous Health Commitments Roadmap to Wellness provides a strong framework for how to move forward with this organizational change. With honesty and humility, we commit to listening to the truths about our shared colonial history, the current impacts, and how Indigenous people experience our healthcare system. We commit to generating a better understanding of the current challenges in advancing Indigenous health and identifying how to move forward in partnership. We commit to taking meaningful action on Indigenous health through sustained and reciprocal relationships with Indigenous peoples and organizations. And we commit to ensuring that the culture shift within AHS becomes our regular way of being and demonstrates accountability to both AHS and Indigenous communities. You'll see pieces of this important work in the virtual sessions that you attend this month. In the spirit of continuous learning, I'd like to issue a challenge to all of AHS on behalf of the Pharmacy Services team. Pharmacy Services is one of the teams that falls under my portfolio. 89% of that team has completed the introductory course for required Indigenous awareness training. 69% have completed the certificate program, compared to 60% across the entire organization. To mark National Indigenous Peoples Month, Pharmacy Services is looking to increase the number of certificate completions to 95% by this time next year. And they are challenging other departments within AHS to do the same. Next year, we hope to report back with increased numbers for the entire organization. So, leaders, gather your teams and make time to complete the online learning courses available within AHS, My Learning Link. I thank you for this opportunity to celebrate with you this month, and I sincerely appreciate all of your hard work to bring Indigenous culture to the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joffe. That's a great challenge. I'm looking forward to see how it unfolds. And I think this month is the perfect month to do it. So let's put our running shoes on and start the race. So part of our extensive and highly skilled medical team, Dr. Esther Tailfeathers joins us now to speak to some of the work we have been doing in AHS towards reconciliation and providing culturally safe, accessible healthcare for Indigenous peoples. Dr. Tailfeathers was born and raised on the Blood Reserve in Southern Alberta, graduated from the University of North Dakota School of Medicine, and completed her family medicine residency in Edmonton at the University of Alberta. Esther has worked in many First Nations communities, including the Blackfeet Reservation, in the emergency room, the Blood Reserve for almost 20 years, and has served in the Northern Alberta community of Fort Chip. As illustrated in the documentary film, Kimi Patsini, The Meaning of Empathy, and I'm not too sure if I got that word correctly, Dr. Tailfeathers worked with her community in response to the fentanyl crisis, which started in the fall of 2014. The opioid crisis and community strategies for harm reduction, treatment, and addressing upstream determinants of health in our home community has been the primary concentration of her community work over the past 7 years. Dr. Tailfeathers is currently the Senior Medical Director for the Indigenous Wellness Core at Alberta Health Services. Welcome, Dr. Tailfeathers.
Thank you, Marty. Okay, hello, all my relatives and peers and friends. My name is Wolf-Faced Woman, and I welcome everyone here today. I'm very happy to be invited to speak here at this, and I just want to say it's been a really hardworking year for everyone, and I'm really glad that we're coming through COVID, although we still have a ways to go, but lots of good work by our people in the front lines, and I just want to thank them. So welcome to National Indigenous Peoples Month, and a very good topic today, or this month, healing through mind, body, and spirit. I want to thank Emil for the prayer, Casey, for your very wise words and direction for us, and Kurt for a beautiful song and starting us off, starting our hearts off in a very good way. I did want to go ahead with our slides here. So this is our slide presentation for this. The Indigenous Commitments Roadmap to Wellness has been evolving and developed through group and collaboration with all of our partners. And so we are very committed to the reconciliation process. Listening, as you can see, is a very strong part of what our task is. And I must say that we've had a number of engagement processes and almost weekly meetings with community members, community voices everywhere from the Métis settlements in the north to the some of the remote communities in Treaty 8 and Treaty 6, as well as really being involved in the urban communities and the process in our our largely developing urban communities. So lots of listening, which is very important to developing and helping to work on a process of better engagement and better health service delivery. So understanding, not only listening, but actually hearing the community needs and setting priorities into our goals, and working with those people collaboratively at all times. Acting, implementing goals based on priorities of the community's needs. I am so proud to talk to you about some of the things that we have developed along the way, and I'm very excited about some of the launches that have already been made and the work that's being done with the zones. So I'll speak a little bit about that in the next few slides, but very proud of the work that our Indigenous Wellness Core has done, and collaboratively with the zones and the people who work within the zones. Next is in being, and that is holding accountability and implementation to improve those goals, and actually being there, not just a one-time thing, but actually working daily to maintain the changes that we want to make. So the reconciliation pillars, that's what holds us up, is the people. So we have been strengthening human resources, and I must say it's such a pleasure to meet a lot of our Indigenous people who are joining us from across the province, whether under AHS or through partnerships. And such a pleasure to meet people in each of our zones and each of our AHS facilities and projects, as well as our SCNs. It's really amazing, the movement that has started, and it's quite inspiring to be able to sit down with people and not have to explain anymore about the importance of addressing Indigenous health priorities. It's there, and many of our allies already know that, as you could hear in the introductions that were made by our zone SOOs. The process has been actually a lot of fun, even though it's been mostly looking at a computer screen for the last 2 or 3 years. I think we're all looking forward to actually seeing each other in person and attending to meetings and ceremonies and joyfully seeing people at the other end. So the journey of working together has been really good in terms of clarifying roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities. Wise practices, supporting Indigenous health priorities with research, evaluation, and the quality work that we're doing. So I would like to really thank the Wisdom Council as well for guiding us along the way, every step of the way. We have been reporting to the Wisdom Council, and Casey and Wally and the elders within the Wisdom Council have been very, very vocal and very helpful in helping us to move along the way. Quality outcomes. As you know, we need to measure what we're doing. And so we need to measure and continue with the sustainable, culturally competent programs and services along the way. And not only that, but quality. We have a number of quality assurance reviews, quality impact assessments, and things that we're doing along the way to measure what we're doing and making sure that we're on track. Next slide, please. So our zone Indigenous health action plans are very amazing. Actually, each zone has been working on developing their plans in collaboration with the communities within each zone. And it's so nice to see the commitment that the zones have made to developing their own Indigenous health action plans. The people, the SOOs that you heard prior to us speaking have really been involved and intently working on developing Indigenous health action plans. Calgary Zone has completed their plan, and they had a beautiful launch, or they have a beautiful video that shows the work that's being done over the years with Calgary Zone. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing the implementation of this plan this month. Edmonton Zone also has begun to work on their Indigenous community engagement and had a really good gathering in May, as Marty had said. South Zone has been working for some time with the communities in South Zone, starting with the Four Winds navigation plan. And actually there were a number of meetings that took place just prior to COVID. So South Zone kind of got a head start on developing their plan and have a very good relationship with Piikani, Kainai, and the Indigenous or the urban Indigenous populations. So yeah, South Zone was pretty good at starting right out from the gate. Central Zone has begun their process and will be collaborating and engaging with the communities within Central Zone. North Zone has developed a plan and will be doing some community engagement. North Zone has the huge challenge of a large geography, lots of distance between communities, and also the fact that the communities in the North Zone, Indigenous communities in the North Zone, have been challenged with not only geography, but developing primary care and linking to tertiary care. So North Zone has a big task ahead of it, but I'm sure with Stacey Greening and the medical leadership there that we will achieve that. And I just want to give a shout out to Shannon and Donna, who basically have been all over North Zone in their huge trucks trying to make it to places that are difficult to get to. But I think that we are on a good course with all of our zones, and very happy to see the engagement that's going on. Next slide, please. Indigenous medical leaders. This is actually a very good action that's being taken in terms of addressing reconciliation and the TRC recommendations or calls to action. In 2021, actually started in late 2020, the Indigenous Wellness Core began to look at the structure of Alberta Health Services and looking at systemic change. And we have been supported by every zone in terms of including Indigenous physicians at each zone table. So these physician leaders will help build the relationships with Indigenous communities. They will be traveling out to communities as well as engaging with our urban Indigenous communities. We'll be looking at and addressing organizations and the healthcare system and how we can begin to implement change at each zone level. Never before have we had a physician representation at each zone table. And this shows to me the commitment that the zones have to including our voice in terms of how we can address our service delivery, as well as all the issues which each zone is faced with. So they will also help to establish strategic and coordinated decision-making alongside and equal at the table of all the physicians that sit at the zone, which is a remarkable step and a remarkable amount of progress in terms of being accepted at the table and being a decision maker at each zone table. We will participate in zone policy development and organizational planning on Indigenous health issues. So I really hope to see these changes transpire over the next few years, but very inspired by the welcoming of each zone and the work that's being done by people like Suzanne Libby and Sarah Allen, who has worked with us to get this off the ground. And it has been a lot of work. And actually, Mark Joffe has really helped bring this to the leadership table, and very thankful for Mark and Catherine Todd, who has recently left us, but very helpful for these leaders in pushing this and helping to change the structure of Alberta Health Services. Next slide, please. This is a really exciting project that started a while ago. Nadine McCree has really done a lot of work with Alberta Health Services in order to develop this 1-800 Indigenous support line. So I was fortunate enough to be able to not participate in the building of this, but to actually be taken by the hand and shown how this is going to work. And it was launched yesterday, or not yesterday, but the 30th. So it is currently active. The number that you see there, you can call 1-844-944-4744. And if you have a question, if you have a barrier that you think needs to be navigated, you call this number, and it's like somebody will take you by the hand and help you navigate the system. So whatever the challenge is, whether it be a patient concern, whether you're looking for referrals, cultural support, primary care support, addiction and mental health support, anything like that, this line, the people at the end of this line will help you to access that service almost immediately. And I'm very impressed by the amount of work that's being done here. And I really think that Indigenous patients will benefit from this 1-844 line. And I really would like to thank Nadine for the hard work she's done, as well as Val and Marty on this. Next page, please. Addressing racism. So this is the elephant in the room that we have all been trying to deal with over the years, and we really need to and have learned that people are taking this seriously. And one of the things that is very difficult is actually identifying that racism is there, and how do we measure it? So we were very fortunate to have Patrick McLean from the emergency department, SCN, as well as Cheryl Barnaby and associates work on the First Nations ED and racism work that was done. And it has been established by this study that there is definitely measurable bias in the emergency rooms. And it's based on a retrospective study of looking back and matching the triage scores of patients that have come into the emergency room. And so what this study does is it helps us to be able to teach physicians that this actually does exist and that we do need to address it. And it's being very welcomed in many circles, and it's being talked about in medical schools, in residency programs, and within physician circles. So I would like to send a shout out to Patrick McLean. Bonnie Healy was also involved in this, and Dr. Cheryl Barnaby, as well as the others in this. I would really like to make a shout out for this courageous work that's being done. The second piece of work that has been so helpful is the work done by Pamela Roach, and the interviews that she had done with a number of physicians, and quite shocking discoveries about what physicians are actually thinking and saying. And the good thing about this is it is now documented. It is now in front of us, all of us, to be able to address in a positive way to help the outcomes of Indigenous people. And those copies can be, as you can see, these articles have been printed in newspapers, and they will be, I mean, you can Google it. I think we have somebody here that can give you the links as well. Okay, so the next page. Oh, sorry. Just before we get on to this one, I just want to say my thanks to all of the physician leaders, our Indigenous physicians that are working so hard across the province, people like Nicole Cardinal Small, Liz Erasmus, Lana Potts, James McCocus, and Kayla Gilbert, a number of our leaders that Indigenous physician leaders that are working very hard across the province, people who have worked for and in Indigenous communities like Kim Macbeth, Susan Adelman, Sonia Regier, who have lifted the Alberta Indigenous Virtual Care Clinic and who carry that very important virtual care clinic. My colleagues, Ellen Toth and Richard Musto, who have been very helpful and are usually behind the scenes, but work very hard. Thankful to physician leaders, our elders and health directors, the number of chief meetings that we've had and the chiefs who have been very participant in lifting the work that we're doing. And a thank you to our staff who have worked very hard this year. Val, Marty, Marjorie, Nadine, all of you out there. I'm sorry if I'm not naming you all. And to our Wisdom Council, Casey and Wally, who have led some very, very difficult work, but very helpful. And I just want to thank Catherine Todd, who has left our Provincial Center of Excellence, but will continue to be involved at different levels. And then finally to Dr. Verna Yu, our CEO, who has recently left us. And I'd just like to leave you with her words that we keep the patient as our North Star. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Tailfeathers, for that information and that reminder from Dr. Yu. And I think that if anything, it speaks to the commitment that AHS has to address Indigenous health. As you can see from our leadership, our physician leadership and our zone leadership and our executive leadership, that we're all on this journey together. The Indigenous Wellness Core has many allies and supports throughout the organization to really bring Indigenous health to the table and to move things forward. And some of the examples that Dr. Tailfeathers presented are just some of the things that we're working on. So we're looking forward to the next year for sure, to see how things unfold even further. So next, we would like to share a touching video with you about the Bassano Health Center staff who worked together with the Siksika Nation family to hold a celebration of life on hospital grounds for one patient. A teepee was erected on the hospital grounds, a sweetgrass ceremony, and a large feast were held. Joe, old yellow woman, was too sick to be taken by wheelchair to the ceremony, so staff devised a way to transport Joe down to participate. Joe could see the teepee from his window every day after the feast until he passed away 2 weeks later. This is their family story.
My father, Joe Olds, grew up in a place they called the Flats on the Siksika Nation. He was an athlete his whole life, a track star, and an excellent baseball player, and a cowboy. But there were some things about my father I didn't know. He didn't talk about how he was feeling because of residential school taught him to hold everything in. I think that is why We were so shocked when he was suddenly diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Even if he knew something was wrong, he kept it to himself. None of us wanted to believe it, and even when my mom was told to look for a hospice, we all still thought he would get better. He had to. He was the patriarch of our family, always teaching us and guiding us. We needed him. He couldn't stay home because he had serious infection and couldn't walk, but he knew that we would visit him every day and wanted to help the family by being closer to home. Luckily, we found a bed at Pisano Hospital. Every day when I went to visit, there was already many people there, spilling out into the waiting room and the hallway. One day it seemed like 100 people were there, and my auntie noticed the janitor had to keep coming back and forth to mop the muddy floor. She asked if he could just leave the mop with us. We would keep the area clean. My father had always taught us to respect the places we were. He was very connected to the land and his culture. He was an honored and respected member of the Sacred Blackfoot Society. Every morning and evening he would smudge. His sacred bundle was always above his bed. We were worried that he would not have access to his secret items in the hospital. But we were wrong. The head nurse allowed us to tie his bundle above his bed. The maintenance person, Chris, would shut off the fire alarm in his room for a few minutes every morning and evening to allow him to smudge. A traditional feast for society members and their families was going to be held at our home, but suddenly became sicker and had to go back to the hospital. All of us were devastated, but Dad most of all because he wanted the feast to be held at home. The site manager knew how disappointed we were, and we talked to her. She said she could help us hold the ceremony at hospital grounds. It all happened so fast. The teepee was set up in the lawn outside of Dad's window. The Siksika Fire Department set up a big tent for the feast, and one of the nurses figured out how to get my dad into the teepee for the ceremony. It was great to see my dad with his friends and family. There was a lot of photos and visiting. He was talking to everyone and smiling. It didn't seem like he was in pain. He was so happy. When everyone left and began to clean up, he wanted to stay outside with us. He kept saying, "Just a little longer, just a little longer." We will always miss him, but he lives in our stories. He was always teaching us, helping us, showing us what is possible. And he still is.
What a beautiful story, showing us what is possible. I think that's a great theme, and it's an exciting well, it's a story because it excites the concepts and the ideas of what we can do as a healthcare system. If we work from our hearts and use our brains to change policy, to address policy issues, to make it happen. I think this is a really good example of what we can do as a healthcare system when we work together and work with our families. Thanks to the family. So next we would like to welcome back Kurt Young and welcome Joanna Gladu, Senior Advisor for the Cultural Competency Education Team with the IWC, with the Indigenous Wellness Core. Joanna Gladu is a Cree Indigenous woman originating from the Big Stone Cree Nation Reserve in Calling Lake, Alberta. Joanna has a master's degree in counseling psychology with over 15 years experience in providing counseling to Indigenous populations. She also provides education, facilitating workshops on cultural safety and cultural sensitivity and trauma-informed therapy. Joanna is grounded in her Indigenous cultural beliefs and adheres to these teachings in both their professional and personal life. I would like to welcome Kurt and Joanna, who are going to be performing a powwow intertribal performance for us live today. There'll be a couple of songs that they're going to be doing. Thank you. That was fantastic. Joanna and Kurt, if you can see what we saw, the colors, the movement, it was just breathtaking. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for doing that. Okay, next I'd like to share a video of another talented AHS employee. There's so much talent that we have. I wish I had that much talent. Douglas Lawnmower is the Indigenous Health Coordinator at the Centennial Center for Mental Health and Brain Injury at Ponoka in the Central Zone. Douglas Lawnmower, aka Lone Walker, Papeokeo Pimote or Peakoteo. As you can see, I don't speak Cree that well, even though I grew up with it, is Dene and Cree and a member of Cold Lake First Nation Treaty 6 from his mother, and was born on the East Prairie Métis settlement on his father's side. He understands and speaks some Dene and Cree and is knowledgeable in both traditional and Métis culture. After his addictions education at the Nietzsche Institute Center for Indigenous Learning, he carried his studies to Grant MacEwan, Edmonton, to achieve a diploma in social work. Doug's education extends to South Australia for an associate's degree in business management from the Australian Institute of Business, University of South Australia. Douglas has been able to work in many areas of the helping field, including alcohol and other drugs, counseling, therapist, social work, corrections. He managed rehab centers, detox centers, Indigenous community services on First Nations reserves, and has achieved personal entrepreneurship. We hope you enjoy this video. That was fantastic. Thanks, Doug. Even though I grew up, both my grandparents were fiddle players, and my dad and my mom knew how to jig, I didn't have the rhythm. I had 2 left feet, so I wasn't able to really learn how to jig. Thanks, Doug. That was really, really nice. So thank you everyone for joining us today for these opening ceremonies. We hope that you will block time in your calendar and visit the list of events taking place either in your own community or online all month long. We encourage you to check the Together for Health webpage throughout the month as the event calendar will be updated as more events are scheduled and planned. We hope you're able to celebrate with us and to help us share highlights from all the incredible work taking place around the organization and communities we serve. So please join me in welcoming back Emil DeRocher. Again, Emil is our cultural helper lead and our elders advocate for the Indigenous Wellness Core, and he's the one that provided us with the opening prayer. So I'd like to turn it back to Emil to close us off in a good way. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Casey. Thank you to our leadership, all of our performers, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I really look forward to the month-long celebrations. Keep checking the Together for Health website to see what's taking place. And thank you all for joining us and taking time out of your day. I hope you have a good morning and a good afternoon and a good weekend. And go Oilers, go. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Marty.